Russia's top diplomat Sergei Lavrov is on a trip to Beijing ahead of an expected visit by Russian President Vladimir Putin, and the Belt and Road Initiative is a key project of Xi Jinping to extend China's global reach. The Chinese president has promoted a vision of a more assertive China, even as the country's outstanding loans have grown equal to that of a quarter of its GDP. Well, representatives of 130 nations are expected at the Belt and Road meetings, and leaders have begun to trickle into the Chinese capital. Among them are Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Chilean President Gabriel Boric, Kenyan President William Ruto, and also Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Now, in comparison, 193 member states are a part of the United Nations General Assembly. And as per the Council on Foreign Relations, a think tank, China has both geopolitical and economic motivations behind the initiative. Xi Jinping has promoted a vision of a more assertive China, even as the country's outstanding loans have grown equal to that of a quarter of its GDP. However, concerns are growing over China's debt trap diplomacy. Experts say that Beijing intentionally, excessively lends money to low-income indebted states that cannot later repay Chinese debt. The borrowing state is thus forced to relinquish some of its strategic assets to decrease its debt burden towards China, basically a debt for equity swap. And countries are becoming ensnared in a debt trap that leaves them vulnerable to China's influence. Kenya's President William Ruto will ask China for a $1 billion loan to complete stalled road construction projects. While Ruto's plan also includes a request to lengthen the maturity periods of existing loans. Well, all eyes will also be on Putin, who is set to meet Xi in a bid to deepen a partnership forged between the United States' two biggest strategic competitors. Well, last month, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that the Russian president gladly accepted Xi Jinping's invitation to visit for the Belt and Road Initiative gathering. Well, China and Russia declared a no-limits partnership in February 2022, that is, when Putin visited Beijing just days before the war in Ukraine broke out. The US cast China as its biggest competitor and Russia as its biggest threat. Putin has hardly ventured beyond his country's borders since the war broke out. And this week's trip is the first to a major global power. Well, this year, trade between the two powers has risen to levels not seen since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. The Chinese imports of Russian oil have offered Moscow a critical lifeline amidst Western sanctions. China has refused to condemn Russia for the war in an effort to position itself as a neutral party, while at the same time offering Moscow important diplomatic and financial support. And for more on this, Greg Swenson, international affairs expert and China analyst, joins us live from London. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, Mr. Swenson.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Right. Now, Mr. Swenson, representatives of 130 countries will be taking part in China's Belt and Road Initiative. At this point, the BRI has become much more than just about economy. Can you take us through both geopolitical and economic motivations behind the initiative?
Yes, a great question. And clearly, this is important to China and especially to Xi, who's got a real personal connection to the BRI. And I think it points to some overcapacity in China. They had, 15 or 20 years of exploiting cheap labor and basically exporting cheap labor to trading partners. But they do have excess capacity. They've moved that capacity offshore into the Belt and Road projects. It's the kind of capital that a lot of these developing countries can't really turn down. From the West, when they want to build infrastructure, they often get a lecture about climate change, and from China they get a shiny new airport. As our friend Larry Summers mentioned earlier this year. And so it has been successful in terms of China's reach, but I don't know that it'll be successful in the long term, given the economic challenges and also demographic challenges that China is experiencing. but so far it's been important, and that's why you see the turnout, both for security reasons as well as trade, and also in terms of energy. And I think you'll see a lot of discussion at the conference about energy, especially with Russia in attendance.
Mr. Swenson, I was just coming to the point you made there regarding BRI's success rate. This is the decade anniversary of BRI. Do you think that China's Belt and Road Initiative is running out of steam, considering the changing geopolitical order in today's time that all of us are witnessing?
Yes, absolutely. You've seen a renewed interest in the West, especially from the United States, in investing in developing countries, especially in Africa, where China has really expanded their footprint. But you're also seeing pushback from some of the countries. You mentioned the debt trap earlier in the segment, and I think that some of the pushback is well deserved. China comes into Africa, for example, in countries where we operate, and they don't really hire local people. They bring in prison labor from China. They exploit the resources. They often don't replace, for example, timber. When they chop down trees, they don't replace them. Their record in mining is really disappointing. So I think countries are starting to realize that bringing in Chinese money might be attractive because it's cheap debt. But often they get into debt traps, as you mentioned, but also they're not really getting the economic benefit that they do from Western capital, and more importantly, Western capitalism and management styles and Western customs. So that's something that I think that the world is starting to learn. I think that Belt and Road is ultimately going to be a disappointment for both China and their trading partners around the world, with some of the investments they've made.
Yes,
and you'll
Mr.
see a
Swenson.
lot of competition from the West.
Yes, Mr. Swenson, my last question to you. With representatives over 130 nations taking part in the forum in China, what kind of a statement is Beijing trying to make here?
Well, I think they're trying to announce to the world that they are an economic power, which they are. They are the second biggest economy in the world. I think there's a lot of weakness in the economy right now. So perhaps they see that coming. They have obviously a property bubble where property in China is 300% of their GDP, where normally in the world it should be somewhere between 100 and 125%. So they do have a property bubble. They have a demographic crisis coming. And so I think they're trying to get ahead of that a little bit. They're also trying to make alliances with countries besides Russia and Iran, which are really emerging as the world's pariahs right now. So this might be an effort to reach out to countries beyond that axis, that is really troubling to many in the geopolitical community.
Yes, Mr. Swenson, thanks very much for taking our time and sharing your insights with us on this.
Thanks for having me.